Hello everyone, my name is Paul Third, and this week I want to talk positively about plugins. I have genuinely been contemplating about kind of bashing like a plugin developer and a certain machine learning plugin that they've released that's completely broken, and I was going to do an entire video about it and talk about machine learning plugins and kind of how I feel they're nowhere near there, like where they are just now, and nobody should be selling them, blah, 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 blah. Right, but we're not here for that today. We're here to be positive, and today I want to talk to you about 5 plugins that I've never discussed on my channel, and the reason why is because I'm constantly so negative. I'm telling you about the things that maybe you should to consider not to buy. Even though this video is not about you buying anything, I just want to discuss plugins that I've been using in my mixes, because I think that's actually, as YouTubers, what we should be speaking about. Not about plugins that you shouldn't need to buy or want to buy for like affiliate sales and stuff. Just plugins that we actually use in our day-to-day mixes. So let's get straight into it. Number 1. Stage 1 by LEAPWING Audio. It's a very, very, very simple plugin. It's got 3 kind of main functions. You've got width, which is what you would expect, right? Adding a bit more side into your signal. You've got a depth. Now, the depth is quite interesting, but you've got to be careful. I never ever, hardly ever used the depth function. I used it on the client mix I had this week, just because I wanted a backing vocal to kind of really sit back in the mix, kind of a ghostly, kind of reverby vibe, but I hardly ever use it. Now, the thing that really, really, really drew me to this plugin was the mono spread. This was actually recommended to me by one of my mentors, and he was like, Paul, he went, do you ever have like certain sources where you'll have something like in mono, and you're like, it doesn't work left, doesn't work right. I've tried the whole like have it left and have like a reverb or delay right, and it just doesn't really sit in the mix. It's just like, it actually just needs to go down the middle, but then it starts to conflict with the kind of bass, kick, snare, vocals, and then you try frequency clashing and stuff, and you're just like, I just spent too much time on it, and then you end up thinking like, oh, should I even have this fucking source in the mix? Now, imagine you had something as simple just as a mono spread, where you could have something down the middle, and you just want it to sit slightly wider, right? And one mono signal, and kind of hug, and sit on the kind of perimeters of the vocals, the kick, the bass, all the things you have down the center. It's a really, really, really easy to use plugin. Now, for anybody looking for context and kind of how I've used these plugins, the width function I used on a recent track that I covered on the Produce Like a Pro podcast. So for anybody that doesn't know, I do have a Produce Like a Pro podcast with Ed Thorne, and we compare the same mixes that are Produced Like a Pro multi-tracks every single week. Well, we try every single week. And Ed really, really, really loved how I managed to get the choruses to kind of really pop out. And it was genuinely just like width, job done. And it actually retains itself quite good in mono, because a lot of the times when you try and do like mid-side tricks and trying to like really add a lot of width, we all know the whole thing about Pro Tools S1 Imager, and you just completely lose it in mono. It's got quite good mono compatibility. Paul's special tip is use one module at a time and switch the other 2 off, right? If you use it like that, use the width and the mono spread, the depth every so often if you feel that you want to have something sit further back in the mix. Now, by the way, I am not sponsored by any of these kind of plugin developers. This is just a tool that I've been using. It works, it's so easy to use. 10 seconds gets me a sound. Let's move on to the next plugin. Now, the next plugin that I've been using quite a lot, and I've never spoke about it on the channel, is the TDR Limiter 6 by Tokyo Dawn Labs. We all know, and if you don't know, right, Tokyo Dawn Labs, they're geniuses, right? And they're plugin geniuses. If you've ever watched Dan Worrell's tutorials, you'll understand why. The Kotelnikov Gentleman's Edition, it's great. It's very, very clever. And I have been using the Limiter 6 a lot. Now, to simplify the plugin, it's really simple. You've got like certain modules. You've got a compressor, you've got a high frequency limiter, you've got a clipper, and then you've got like a normal limiter as well. But each module has its own kind of separate settings. So in the clipper, you've got a brick wall mode, you've got an open, which is basically like a multi-band clipping, and you've got a low frequency clip mode. And the low frequency clip it's genuinely been a bit of a revelation for me, because not many people know this, but I have started to implement a little bit of analog gear into my mix. I'm not converted, right? I'll never buy expensive like analog gear. It's just not going to happen, especially compressors and EQ. It's not going to happen. So I have been using the DBX subharmonic synthesizer. Now, all I need to tell you is, right, when you're adding in all of that sub, you're going to cause more limiting, right? Your limiting's timing is kind of going to go a little bit off the plot a little bit, and you're going to start getting like the low end, that kind of sub triggering the limiting, where if you clip that low end, now what I do is, I don't want to give away all my secrets, but there's a kind of way where I've just got, so it's just the kind of the sub, it's just the sub, and I bring it in parallel, right? And I just use the low frequency clip to just dynamically just take it down. So it's like a dB of compression, and so it's the compressor module, and it's the low frequency clip module, and it's like a dB of each. And what it does is it just controls that low end sub. And when I add that into the mix and I go to my limiter, it's not affecting the limiter's timing. So it's a really, really, really handy way of adding in that excessive sub without affecting the timing of your limiter. Now, if you want more information kind of about all of this, in terms of like the properties of acoustic sound and the energy of acoustic sound and how like we hear acoustic sounds, blah, 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 and how compressors actually like receive acoustic sound and what triggers it, blah, 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 I'll link a video here and it'll make more sense. So I use that, and I also use the high frequency limiter, which I really, really, really love on overheads. I do still use kind of soothe just a little bit, but I like the high frequency limiter because it really does just kind of clamp down on the overhead, just on the cymbals, and it just kind of cleans up the high end a little bit. I prefer it to like just like dynamic EQ. It's just really effective high frequency limiter. Try it on acoustic guitars, try it on hi-hats if like you want to kind of take out a little bit of like a harshness if it's harsh, but especially cymbals. It just kind of really cleans up the cymbals in a really nice way and stops cymbals from kind of being that harsh. So it's a very, 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 very geeky, but very, very powerful and high quality like limiter suite. I genuinely suggest you try it out because it's super cheap as well. Honestly, I think I picked it up for like 30 quid or something. Definitely something to try out. Right, this number 3, right? This next one is going to be a little bit controversial and it's very geeky. It's hard to talk about because many people disagree about EQing to noise slopes. It makes sense to me, but I suggest that you only use a plugin like Ceilings of Sound Pro, I call it COS Pro for short, if you understand why you would be EQing certain things to noise. It's not my main EQ, I don't use it on every source, I only use it on 2 things. I use it for taking out the low kind of rumble. You always get like rumble around 200 to 400 kind of hertz, right? Normally I sell them 300, 350, right? Now there's a certain way where you could kind of find the beater of the kick and you can set like that kind of low mud and you could like take it down in relation to the beater. Makes sense and it works every time and it's just really easy for me to do. It's really quick. It's quite difficult to get used to and it's quite finicky. And like I've spoken to the developer Menno, he's a very clever guy. Honestly, you should watch his videos on his channel. There's loads and loads and loads of great videos. And I've told him certain things I would like implemented and he's like, no, we're going to try it. We're just trying to over time just make updates and stuff. So it is going to get better because it is, especially the EQ, it's a little bit finicky and it can be a little bit annoying. But once you get your head around it, honestly, like it can make absolute sense. Again, I don't use it for everything. I don't suggest that you use it for everything, but the way that I use it, like most, is on vocals. Now, this is going to go over your head, but essentially what I do is you get the fundamental, and then you have from like the fundamental of like the chest resonance, like your chest voice. So you do that, and then I kind of have from the chest voice kind of down the mid range, and I follow like a 0.4 minus 4.5 dB slope, which is how we hear kind of acoustic sims. And then you normally have like your 5K region, that obviously there's a lot of presence in your 5K region. So what I do is I normally set that to brown noise because brown noise is a little bit darker and that's what I want. I just want that kind of specific area to kind of be tuned to brown noise. So I'll have my mid-range nice and present and then around that area I'll just kind of dip it to brown noise. And then in terms of my high end 10 to 12K, I'll then set that kind of more in line with pink noise. And the reason I do that is because pink noise is the most pleasing kind of sound to our ears. We can listen to pink noise for a long time without kind of it sounding harsh. That's why many people sleep to pink noise. Think about like that kind of soothing sound. Think about your high end. If you're kind of ever worried about, I want the right amount of top end without it sounding harsh, then like what I've just said to you there is, in my head makes sense, right? Your kind of, your presence where your kind of sibilance could be to brown noise, right? So it's just enough where it's just kind of tucked a little bit, and then like your higher frequencies, your air frequencies to pink noise. The reason why I really have adopted this method is because I use parallels. So I've got 3 parallel compressors, vocal parallels, and I print them. And I've also got all my background vocals. Now, I apply the exact same EQ processing to them in relation to their sound. So obviously they've all got their own high ends and stuff like that, but they all kind of get the same process where it's like the pink noise and the fundamental to minus. You know what I've already said. And what that means is that all of the vocals kind of have the same sound. So I don't really get as much in regards to phasing issues when using parallel printed compressors. Because obviously if you have different kind of EQ sounds on every parallel, then again, you can kind of get phasing issues, where I just find that it works a little bit better doing it that way. And all the background vocals are processed the same as well. And I actually do it a little bit differently on background vocals. I tried it this week where I can't remember which engineer it was, but he was talking about background vocals, and he was talking about how his background vocal sound was always to make the background vocals have a lot of air compared to the main lead. And I tried it on this this client mix that I'm doing, where it's an amazing like pop production, and they want it to kind of sound like doing Doja Cat, kind of Clint Gibbs mixes. I know.
Cheers.
But I tried that kind of out, and I was like, yes, that really works, where I've got the kind of 10 to 15, 16k to pink noise, where on the lead vocal I've kind of only got the 10 to 12k range to pink noise, but I extend that further up in the background vocals, and it really works. And they've all got the same processing, and all the harmonies layer well together. Right, that is, in my head, how it makes sense. It might not make sense to you, but it's been working for me, and it may not work for you, and it is what it is. The plugin's really finicky to use, and they're getting there, and it will get better over time. But there you have it, right? EQing to noise profiles. Who would have thought? Who would have thought EQing to noise slopes would be a thing? But yes, I do adorn it, and I do suggest you at least try it out. Right, second last one, number 4, the LINDELL 7X500. This has been a really big plugin for vocals for me. Now, I had the 500 series hardware in that rack behind me, the LINDELL, the actual LINDELL compressor, and it gave me a sound that I've never ever achieved from any other 1176. See, the thing is with 1176 is that many people assume that 1176s are like the fastest compressor ever.
They're so fast, they're so grabby. Bang, 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 bang. 1176, bang, 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 bang. Bang.
When actually they actually have quite like a a soft knee. They aren't as fast and as grabby as what people think. They're grabby, but like they're not as grabby as other compressors. And what LINDELL did was he made his own 1176 style compressor, and I think it was meant to be kind of more like CLA's Blue Stripe that was modded, so it had a faster attack. And honestly, like even when I measured it all in plugindoctor, and the attack of the LINDELL is faster than any 1176, even at its slowest setting. So in its slow setting, it still has a faster attack than the 1176 in its fastest setting. So what that results in is this very grabby sound. And if you compress it really hard, like 12 to 14 dB, it gives you this kind of, I call it diction, where it kind of grabs a lot of the kind of, and what it does is, if you add that in parallel, it just allows you to just kind of bring in a little bit more diction and a little bit more spittiness if the vocal needs it. Now, everybody's kind of talking about the BLA, the Black Lion Audio Bluey, and I was going to demo it, and then I was like, no, I've got UAD plugins, so I've been using the UAD 1176 LNAE, the anniversary edition, and it's a great compressor where at the 2-to-1 ratio, you can hit it like 10 to 20 dB, and it gives you this nice character without kind of sucking the life out of it, but it kind of still lacks the diction that I just don't get from 1176 compressors. But I've heard that on some like analog mixes that people have certain compressors that kind of give you that kind of spitty sound. And if you just have the LINDELL plugin, now I sold the hardware because the LINDELL plugin sounded identical on vocals. Now it was his own hardware, so obviously it was going to be modelled well, but the envelopes are modelled really well, the compression's modelled right, the harmonics is modelled right. And the mix knob is better on the plugin than the hardware. The hardware is really sensitive, it's cheap, right? And It's not got a lot of headroom and it craps out really quickly. But the plugin has the sound, but it has more headroom. And it's a bit of a secret little vocal technique where I actually have it on this voice right now, and I use it in the podcast for me and Ed's voice. And it's just a really, really good compressor, and it's really easy to use, right? Slow attack. Just leave it default and just hit the input until you've got 12 to maybe 14 dB compression. I'm dialing the mix knob, maybe just 1 to 2, right? Just 1 to 2 on the mix knob, and you'll start to hear this diction, this kind of clarity in the vocal. Sometimes it could be a bit much because it's so fast. It's not smooth, but there's certain vocals, a spoken voice I think really needs it for things to sound a little bit more intelligible, and a vocal sometimes needs it just to kind of have that kind of diction to stand out in a mix. So honestly, try it out. It's cheap. I think it's like 30 quid. I just went out and bought it myself because I refused to go back to the Plugin Alliance subscription. So I bought that myself. I had the hardware. It sounds identical to the hardware on vocals. I prefer it. Try it out. You can get it from Plugin Alliance. It's cheap. Use it in the way that I use it. And yeah, get back to me, because I genuinely think that if you try it out, you'll know what I mean. And it genuinely does make, if you combine it with other compressors, in my opinion, it makes plugin compressors sound more analog. I know I said it, but fuck it. And last but not least, I have an effect for you, an effect that I use quite a lot. Now, this effect, somebody told me it was free. Ed told me it was free. It surprised me, and I probably should have checked before I made the video, but it's good to have kind of these plugins in your arsenal from a creative perspective. And the tremolo is just something that I keep going back to, because what I love about a tremolo is, obviously with a tremolo, right, it's moving up and down, right? A wee Mexican wave there, right? That's how I dance when I'm in nightclubs, right?
Just pretend I'm a fucking walking tremolo, right?
But what's great about the NOISEASH is that whilst it's giving you the up and down, it's also giving you the left and right. So it's giving you this kind of perception of movement. Now, if you want to hear what that sounds like, if you listen to the podcast that will be out, not this week, but next week, you'll get to hear the client mix that me and Ed have worked on. I'm an absolute nutter, and I could potentially lose myself an entire album, but because I'm a loyal person and I am very invested in this Produce Like a Pro podcast and me and Ed's journey, I was like, no, what, let's test ourselves. A client got in touch and was like, I want you to kind of be creative and take my mix and see what you could do with it. So I did it, and I was like, we'll get Ed involved in the mix as well. So I've genuinely potentially gave Ed an entire album. And I'm just going to be out of pocket. But, it is what it is. You've got to test yourself. And one thing that he picked up on was the use of the NOISEASH Action Tremolo on the verse guitars. And he was like, you had this great movement. And there's a lot of times in mixes that I've used it on guitars, sometimes synths. And it's just, if something sounds a bit stagnant and maybe just a bit boring, I'll just do it, and it just does this, and it just kind of sits almost like you're at a fucking 90s rave.
Big fish, little fish, cardboard box.
And it just does that. And it's a really, really nice effect. It doesn't work all the time, but I love having tools when you're sitting there going, I want to add something. And sometimes you've got I'll add a bit of delay, I'll add a bit of this. And it's never really... It's subtle. It's just kind of subtleties, and a lot of times you need that, I know, because my vocal chain is full of very, very subtle harmonizers and 8th delays and 16th note delays, and just they all kind of sit there tucked and stuff. But when it comes to the NOISEASH, I just love how I can just make it have a sound, and it adds this movement. And if it is free, happy days. Try it in the link below and you can try it out. And I genuinely think it will be helpful for you. And there you have it. There you go. 5 plugins I've never talked about on the channel. And there you go. Something positive for you, right? There you go. A bit of positivity from Paul Third. I've got my wee jumper here, the audio bullshit detected. This is what I was going to wear, because I was going to absolutely nail that machine learning plugin. But I don't need to, right? Here's some plugins for you to try out, right? If you want to try them out, try them out. If you don't want to try them out, then don't try them out, right? It's just me in my little geeky audio journey. If you want to get stuck in, right, and listen to my mixes, then go to paulthird.com. I've got my mixes on there. My name's Paul Third. Hopefully this has been helpful. Leave your comments down below if you've kind of tried any of these plugins, or if you do something similar, or just something that you've been using recently and you're like, know what, I'll tell you all about it because it might help you. There you go. My name's Paul Third, and I'll see you again whenever I see you.